on?
So we worked with the McKinsey company. We got DFID to pay for them because they are extremely expensive. I think at that time they were around $1,000 per day. But they did a sort of green scenario setting for the economy up to 2025. So all of a sudden we found ourselves with a big vision, an evidence-based, if I can say so, an analytical piece of work which was done with the help of the McKinsey on a green path of development. I think by now McKinsey has done it in a critical mass of countries, and you might have seen the graphs they have are very interesting. You can Google them and find them. So you have like bars which tells you if you do, for instance, transport with renewable energy, you will have a certain abatement of CO2 emissions, which translated in economic terms will mean this type of savings or this cost. If you have irrigation done through certain means, again, of renewable energy, then you will have this abatement on CO2. The abatement could be posted on the international market for climate financing, so you may look at gaining so much through climate financing and selling of CDRs. So this is the type of analytical piece of work that I'm talking about. All of this you can find it on our website if you want to look at the details. And then we looked at how do we support all this work, and we thought of creating a climate facility. A climate facility which is a facility managed by the government, by possibly the Treasury, the Ministry of Finance. However, the facility which could have the possibility of being managed at the beginning by UNDP through, at that time we were thinking of what it used to be called the Multi-Partner Trust Fund Office, Bisrat's office, and which is now Yannick Glemaire's office, to look at how to manage a facility that would have helped the government of Ethiopia to attract international carbon financing. As you know, certain fiduciary standards are required for managing carbon financing inputs and dollars, related dollars. So we felt that for those partners who would have not had enough trust in the national mechanisms, then UNDP could have played the role of broker and bringing in the fiduciary services which were required for that. So, as I said, a cascading of three elements: vision, the strategy for a different path of development, and then a facility which would have enabled the government to attract the funding for what the strategy predicaments were. This is, in a nutshell, what is all the concept which was developed with the team in Ethiopia on what we call the climate resilient and green economy. What I think could be innovative for other countries is really to look at a role of UNDP to be at the forefront in the analytical component, but also to fully play our convening role and then bringing in our fiduciary services and systems and putting at the disposal of the government our systems in order to indeed meet those standards that will allow the government to attract additional resources. I hope this clarifies in a few words what was the experimentation done in Ethiopia, and this is useful maybe for you to start thinking on how to do it. Now, if I have to pose some questions related to our learning, I would say, for instance, does it make sense to separate adaptation from mitigation? Does it make sense to separate adaptation from disaster risk reduction? how is your country where you operate looking at disaster risk reduction compared to adaptation? Are the institutions different? Are the institutions dealing with disaster risk reduction having an understanding of what adaptation from a climate change perspective means? Are this institution on disaster risk reduction who deal with humanitarian funding most of the time, are they aware of what is available in terms of climate financing that could be attracted to the country? The second question I would like maybe to pose in retrospect and that we learned is, are there incentives for the country office to work in these areas? Can we ourselves attract some funding? We are all looking at mobilizing resources. So what are the resources that could be mobilized through this type of work, which could come and come via UNDP? Is there enough incentives? Is there capacity for us to do indeed analytical work? And by now McKinsey is doing a lot of work, but we cannot afford McKinsey. We don't have also the capacities that at times McKinsey has. So how do we equip our offices, even if it is for a brief period of time, to deal with these challenges? So for instance, in Ethiopia, we made a choice of investing on some expertise for a very limited period of time to look at specific lines and stream of work. So we recruited a couple of experts to look at specific issues which could have brought us to the table. Then how do you work with the World Bank? DFID is very, very interested in these areas and has a lot of expertise. So how do we maximize this interest, but at the same time we maintain somehow a leading role, because it's very easy to be swamped by the World Bank into a large group of partners, or completely be marginalized by some other partners. As you know, Norway, DFID, and I would say now some of the lines also brought by the regional banks are extremely important. So these are the questions that I would like to leave open for your maybe further reflection, thoughts, and advice. Also, it will be nice to be in contact with you and hear how we can progress on the thinking. I thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you, as I said before, all the best. Bye-bye.